as we all know, ended last Thursday after a really hectic 2 months in what was supposed to be, I mean, it was a fiscal session, but there was a lot going on beyond just fiscal bills. So I'm just going to run through, I think, some of the bills that all of us were tracking and were interested in. I know GACDA was tracking, I think, about 90 bills that Bambi has on her spreadsheet. I won't go through all of those. I'll just kind of try to hit the highlights. And I know many of you on the call worked on these bills, so please just jump in and add whatever you'd like. So the first bill I wanted to mention is House Bill 1, of course, the state budget for fiscal year 22. The governor has signed House Bill 1 with a couple of line item vetoes, none of them disability service related. So I know many of us on this call were working specifically on getting provider rates increased for all aspects of the disability service system. So for the DD waivers, the aging waivers, support coordination, and the community homes. Where we ended up was with a state general fund appropriation of $16.3 million. Thanks, Bambi, no problem. It was making me a little dizzy. So $16.3 million in state general fund, with the federal match is a little over 50 million. I think it's about $51 million. That was so that was added to the House.
Can whoever can mute besides Caroline? Everyone mute. Thank you.
Thanks. So the 16.3 million was added in on the House floor with an amendment by Representative Rick Edmonds. We expected the remainder of our ask to be added on the Senate side, which unfortunately didn't happen. So we ended up in a situation where the DD waivers received a share of funding, but unfortunately, the other things we asked for were left out, including the aging waivers. So I think that the legislators who were working on that did not really necessarily understand the implications of just funding one part of the disability service system. So they came back, led by Representative Edmonds, with a resolution, HCR 127, which literally passed within 2 days last week. It went through the entire process, which urges LDH to make adjustments and basically find funding within the department to equitably fund all aspects of the system. So not only the DD waivers, but the aging waivers, the OAS waivers, support coordination, and community homes. Now, the resolution does not have the force of law, but it can help the department to give them some cover to sort of interpret the legislative intent to find more funding. So that went through as well. And actually the Medicaid Oversight Committee is having a hearing next week to talk about that resolution and to talk about the needs of the disability system. So that's kind of where we ended up with the budget. And I guess I'll just run through these and then maybe do questions at the end or comments at the end, if that makes sense. The next bill I wanted to mention was House Bill 7. So this is the so-called pink tax that Representative Amy Freeman was sponsoring to provide a tax exemption for diapers and for feminine hygiene products. This had to go to conference committee. It got a little dicey at the end, but it did pass and has been sent to the governor. And so I think the state, it will take effect next year, July of 2022, an exemption on the state sales tax for those items. So that should really be a help in a lot of ways, but especially for you know, people with disabilities who need those products. Another bill we were tracking was House Bill 91 by Representative Mike Echols. And this was, this would have allowed, this bill has come up a couple of times in the past few years in session. It would allow companies like Uber and Lyft to provide non-emergency medical transport in the Medicaid system. This bill was voluntarily deferred in committee again this year, and I think where we ended up there is that everyone recognizes there's a problem with the non-emergency medical transport, but the department is a bit hesitant to allow Uber and Lyft to get into that business because they don't have the same sort of background check standards for their drivers that the department has for people who participate in the program. So, but I think that's an issue that will keep coming up, and hopefully the department will keep working on. The next one is House Bill 172. This is Rhonda Butler's dental bill. And I actually want to ask, I think Kathy Dwyer, you're on the line. Do you want to talk a little bit about that bill, which did pass?
Sure, I'll be happy to. And there's a companion resolution that goes along with it. If you would like, I could also just discuss that a little bit too.
Sure.
HB 172 initially started out to include comprehensive dental services for adults with developmental disabilities aged 21 and older, because currently Medicaid does not cover much, if any, for adults. Basically just a few extractions and dentures. So it was supposed to support both those residing in home and community-based settings, as well as ICFDD facilities. But at the last minute, when Representative Butler was trying to finalize the bill, OCDD and LDH were not able to, and Medicaid in particular, were not able to come up with the correct formula needed for the ICFDD population, because they get a per diem rate. So they would have to try to come up with an exact formula to include comprehensive dental services in that per diem rate. So she pulled that population out of HB 172, but then filed HCR 34, which then requires LDH to study what that formula should be, and come the next session, they have to have that formula ready for 60 days prior to the next session. She will then file a bill to include the ICFDD population in with the comprehensive dental services. So HB 172 and HCR 34 both passed, sailed through all committees. We're very, very pleased. There were no objections throughout the whole way, and it's going to provide a full set of services. The current services that children receive under Medicaid now up through age 21 will then be extended to those 21 and older. The first year fiscal note includes what we refer to as startup funds that will require OCDD and Medicaid to study which federal mechanism is going to be required to implement this program, whether it be an amendment to the existing waivers or a new program. And then come the next year is when we're going to need approximately 5 million state general funds for the actual services, with the federal match on top of that. So we're very pleased, and we have been recognized nationally, and am told that we are the first state to do this, and they want to start emulating us and using us as a model for nationwide. So we're really excited about the progress we've made and the attention Louisiana is getting because of it. Thank you.
That is awesome, Kathy. Yeah, thank you for that, and thanks for all the work you put into it, and the entire task force and all the advocates that you got on board. It's going to help so many people, and we're looking forward to the ICFs being included next year. So thanks and congrats. Oh, you're muted, Kathy.
Oh, sorry. So are we, and we definitely owe a lot to our entire task force. We have a lot of great people in our task force. Everyone's been working very hard on this. It's been a wonderful team effort, from OCDD through Medicaid to the LSU Dental School personnel to families, Karen Scallon. I mean, we pulled in a lot of people, and everybody's just been, wonderful. It's just been a wonderful team effort. So thank you.
Great. Yeah, that's how it should work. Everybody pulling in the same direction. It's really awesome. So next bill I will mention is House Bill 204, and this was a bill that a couple different organizations, including mine and Kelly's, were working on by Representative Chris Turner. So this was a bill that basically would have permanently continued some of the COVID-related program exceptions that LDH put in place for the waiver programs. So, we polled providers, recipients, family members, self-advocates about which COVID-related program flexibilities had been most helpful to them, and put those in this bill to try to continue them permanently. So these included allowing DSPs to exceed the 16-hour per day limit on hours in emergency situations, allowing family members to be paid DSPs, and allowing for some virtual visits and services at the direction of the recipient and the family. So we had a lot of support for the bill from legislators, from family members, advocates, providers. What ended up happening, a couple different things happened. One is that the bill got a huge fiscal note put on it that we eventually, it was over $100 million when it started, which we eventually got down to a couple million. But that's always challenging for a bill when it gets a fiscal note. And just the timing of the budget this year, the budget was sort of passed and sent to the governor before we could get an appropriation for this bill. And so given that LDH committed to working on making some of these changes permanent through rule within the coming months, we opted to pull the bill, defer it, and and work through the rulemaking process. So we'll still continue to work on that because we know that those flexibilities have been really helpful. We're just going to do it outside of the legislative process at this point. So that was 204. Next bill, also by Rhonda Butler, House Bill 446, which creates the Office of the State Americans with Disabilities Act Coordinator within under the governor in the Division of Administration. And I don't know, Bambi, if y'all were specifically working on this, if you want to mention anything about it.
Yeah, so we talked extensively yesterday afternoon in our accessibility committee about that. And so from there, we're going to make some recommendations in regards to a job description to make sure that this is implemented in a way that is doing what we intend to do as advocates and really supporting people with disabilities to have access to our state government. So.
Great. Very good. Another bill, House Bill 697. This is from Representative Stefanski. This has been signed by the governor. It's now Act 80. This is related to sports wagering. So it authorizes the Louisiana Lottery Corporation to conduct sports wagering and then levies a tax on the revenues from that. So Representative Stefanski included a provision in this bill where a certain portion of the taxes are deposited into the Community and Family Support System Fund. So that fund is only available to recipients of the DD waivers. But I think there might, or Kelly noted here, there might be an opportunity to utilize that fund for folks maybe who don't have a waiver or are waiting. So but it is a funding source for disability services that did make it through the process. HCR 34, Kathy mentioned, that was the dental ICF resolution. I already mentioned HCR 127. This is, that was the resolution kind of trying to clarify the language around the appropriation for the DD waivers. And that will be, as I said, on the agenda for the Medicaid Oversight Committee next Friday, if anyone wants to check that out. HR 99 by Representative Paula Davis. This is urging Congress, the United States Congress, to support the Able Age Adjustment Act. And Sharon Hennessy, I see you. I think you were working on this. Do you want to share anything about it? I think you're muted. There you go.
Mute. No, just that it's really important because we supported the original Able Act. It took years and years to pass. And the age restriction was implemented the last few days before it actually passed to satisfy a fiscal note that never materialized. And so it's really important that this opportunity be extended to a lot more people. And that's what this will do. And it does have good bipartisan support in Congress. It does. So it's back in front of around. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Sharon. Okay, just a couple more I wanted to note, and y'all probably talked about this in the Education Committee, but the Senator Foyle's Senate Bill 86, which would allow for cameras in special education settings, did pass and has been sent to the governor. So that it didn't come with an appropriation. So school districts sort of have to come up with their own funding for that, as I understand it. But it does authorize, students to be able to request, or parents to be able to request that. Does anyone want to add anything on the camera bill? I know a lot of people were working on it. Okay. Oh, Bambi, I see you unmuted.
I would just say that, first off, thank everyone who advocated for that. This is an example, like many of the other bills that you have mentioned before, that has taken many years. And so I think this is like the fourth year that this is been brought up. Last year, because of COVID, it didn't move very far. And I think the 2 previous years, it didn't, if I remember correctly, it was either 1 or 2 years. So it's important. I think the message is that, you gotta stay the course, and advocacy is kind of a long game. So, but eventually we get there. So appreciate that. And I see that Kathy has her hand raised. Kathy, can you turn on your camera so the interpreters can see you? Okay, good. I'll spotlight you.
A little trouble there with my eye-hand coordination. Yeah, I just wanted to add, I am not as familiar with the bill as I would like to be, but I do know that Kathleen Canino and Caitlin Casaberry and quite a few others have been working on this very diligently. And what it does is instruct the public school systems to develop policy for installing cameras in classrooms when a parent requests the camera. So it's going to be important that parents who have children in the, I forget the term they use in school, it's been so many years, in the segregated classrooms, what do we call those? The self-contained classrooms, that they request cameras to be installed. And, without that request, it's not going to happen. So I think that's one of the key parts of it, that once the policy is in place in the school systems, and I'm not sure of the timeline, then parents are going to need to make a formal request for those cameras to be installed.
And Kathy, to that point, I really feel like the first thing that we need to do is make sure the school districts develop good policies. Make sure
Absolutely.
they do it in a timely manner, and they are good policies that represent what the intent of the bill is. So that was something.
Absolutely.
Education committee. We have the special every parish is supposed to have a special education advisory council. I'm not certain if that is the case, but they are by law supposed to have that. And so those councils should be advising on this. So I think there's an opportunity to really push on, these 2 different laws and make sure that they're doing what they need to do on the front end.
Yes, good point.
And Lynette had her hand raised.
That's wonderful. It will help everyone, including teachers.
I agree. And Steve Kaufman has his hand raised.
Hey, we got it this time. Is there a template for what a policy would look like?
A policy, this particular policy, I'm not aware of that. I haven't heard anyone speak of that. But it's a good point. Typically, the school board association will share this with the school districts, those type of things where it's a requirement. But you know, that their perspective on what it should be may not be the same as disability advocates. So we need to be involved in that.
There is another bill I wanted to mention, and I see Ann on the phone, and I can't remember the number of your bill, Ann, I'm sorry, but this is related to unemployment for individuals with disabilities, if you want to share a bit about it.
It's House Bill 259, which was signed by the governor, is now Act 194. And this is the bill that I spoke with this committee about that makes all employees with disabilities eligible to collect unemployment insurance at Ability One agencies, which previously was not the case. So it closes an exemption for that particular population and acknowledgement that these jobs are real jobs. And if these folks got laid off, that they deserve the same benefits as their colleagues without disabilities.
Awesome. Congrats on getting that across the finish line. Very important. Okay, I mean, as I said, that's just a snapshot of the many, many bills that that the group was tracking. Kind of the overview I have, but are there any other bills that anyone was watching that they want to share or ask questions about?
Can I just say something while people are raising their hands or whatever? I actually saw on my my Facebook timeline like a post from 3 years ago saying how it's so heart-wrenching that we have to go to the Capitol and beg for services every year. And that we need to stop having that narrative of, you know, kind of pity and that type of narrative, and one of empowerment and saying that people with disabilities, you know, all the things that we know people with disabilities can do whenever we support them. And I was just reflecting on the legislation for this year and actually like the advocacy. We didn't have to go this year and beg not to have services cut because somebody's going to die. You know, we were asking for more money because we need to improve our services and improve the system. You know, we look at the ADA bill or the bill that Ann just talked about, you know, people with disabilities, they are employees, they work, they're contributors. And so I find that there's been a shift, which is good, that we start talking about people in a different way. Now, there's certainly much more work to do because some of our legislators sometimes will, you know, they'll go back to that. But I think we had to use that strategy for so long in order to save our services. But I'm really happy to see that shift. And I think we need to continue to make sure the way we talk about people with disabilities is very positive and all that they can accomplish. So just want to share that.
Definitely. Yeah, and another thing I just wanted to mention, you know, I know we didn't get everything we wanted during the legislative session in terms of the funding and some of the other priorities, but I really think, I mean, as Kathy was talking about with the dental bill, I just think we had a lot of really big wins and a lot of big wins that have been in the process for a long time. And, you know, and a lot of good collaboration. And so I just think let's keep that momentum up. going into the next few months. I know there's buzz about having a special session in the fall, given all this kind of federal money that's coming our way. And I think, you know, as much as possible, if we can just keep having a unified message around these services and around the things that individuals with disabilities are doing in our communities, I think we're going to have even more success this year. And I know that there is an understanding among a lot of legislators that the entire system, some pieces of the system have been left behind historically, and were left behind again during this session. And I think they do want to be sure that we're funding, you know, funding the system equitably. It shouldn't matter, you know, where you live and what setting you live, the nature of your disability. You know, everyone in Louisiana who has a disability should have access to quality services. And so I think the Medicaid oversight hearing next week is going to be a first step, and really not a first step, but a continuing step post-session to keep that conversation going. So I just wanted to add that as well.
This is Alice Boljoin with LDH Office of Aging. To talk about the funding issue, I think the legislature didn't realize that now trust fund monies cannot be used to fund increases for elderly waivers. So I think that, you know, absent a funding source, they got left behind. I think the message I would like to be able to share with you is that, unfortunately, this creates a $5 per hour differential in the personal care or the DSW for their staff. So the elder day waiver participants will have a very difficult time finding staff if they're getting paid $5 an hour less than DD waivers. So I just wanted to, you know, and I let you know what that amount looks like, because I think it's so unfair. And I understand why it happened, and I know that's kind of, they dropped into the default position, and you know that's what they could do. But I just wanted you to know that that's kind of how things were left. The other thing I'd like to say about House Bill 204, we will be working with you to establish some of these things in rulemaking. Some of the reasons we had is that some things CMS will not let us do. And so if we can't, the fiscal note, I guess I'm addressing the fiscal note. If CMS disallows us to do these things, then we lose federal funding. So the loss of federal funding is what generated the fiscal note. So I just wanted to share those two things.
Thanks, Allison.
Can I add to that? I'm glad Allison brought up that point. I was going to bring that up later. That was probably the issue that caused me the most heartburn, was whenever I saw that funding for our DD population and not our aging population. I mean, y'all know it's the same workforce, and we can't have that disparity. You know, I don't feel like as a state that we can have that. I feel like it puts our state in a position of potential litigation if we start having like what Allison described. I mean, providers are gonna go to where they can make more money, and they don't make much money to begin with. So I can't fault them for doing so. We know we have a limited workforce. So I really hope that regardless of where your services may come from, or that the person you care about, that you look at the system holistically and advocate for our aging. We're all gonna age or have someone in our family who are aging. And so we wanna make sure those systems are whole. So I appreciate that point.
And, you know, I think too, parents of children with developmental disabilities are aging. So
That's
having
right.
them having support is going to help things from breaking down. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. So Caroline, I guess the next step would be, does anybody have any questions about the legislation? No, Caroline went over a lot of things, and I posted the link in the chat, so I wouldn't make your eyes spin around. So you could look at that and see if there's any legislation. You can raise your hand. And Karen, do you want to speak? I see you have a comment.
Hi, Bambi. Yes, I just couldn't find my raise my hand button for some reason.
Hold on a second. I messed up the spotlight. Okay, now we got the interpreters back. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. I lost my raise your hand button, but I was just wondering, is it too late to give the money to providers? It's just an increase so that we can divide it equally among the people working in the aging population and in the other waivers, because I have employees in both. I have people that are, we have respite, IFS, PCA, SIL. And I'm like you guys, I don't want to tell some employees you're going to get a raise and the other ones you can't. And we have, I'd like for it to be divided equal in order to be enough to go around for everybody. And then of course we have the complication of having people working in the congregate setting in the group homes. So we'd like for everybody to get something. And so we are wrestling with our pay scale and how we're going to get something for everybody when we have a specific number that we have to give to one group of people.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I agree with all of that, Karen. I mean, my association represents providers of all the services, community homes, ICFs, all the waiver programs. And I mean, unfortunately, with the money that was appropriated by the legislature, it can only be used for the DD waivers, just because of the funding source and the way the language shook out. I mean, I know that, with the resolution that came after the appropriation, they're at least urging the department to find some funding to make an equitable increase across all the areas. There's also the federal money coming through, the enhanced federal FMAP bump. I don't want to speak for, Allison or OAAS, but I don't know if there might be an opportunity there. That money can't be used for ICFs. So it can only be used for home and community-based services, the federal money.
Right.
But I would hope either between that or another special session, there might be an opportunity for an appropriation for other services, but not from the money in House Bill 1, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yes, and it is on our list for the enhanced FMAP. We're just disappointed that we have to use that to fund this, and we didn't get an appropriation because there's so much that needs to be done, and we'd like to make more progress. So that's kind of where we are.
Well, thank you, Caroline. Thank you.
Hey, this is Kelly. I just wanted to add that that was definitely a surprise to us as well, Allison. The Senate side was supposed to add the aging piece. There were some conversations that we don't know exactly what happened. It was in and then came out. So unfortunately, but it wasn't that we forgot about them. We absolutely did not. I mean, we have all 3 provider associations provide those services. And I mean, that we're all in the same predicament where you can't give some raises to some employees and not to the others. And so I think that the Medicaid Oversight Committee may also touch a little bit on that next Friday. The agenda's out and I can send it to the group if you like, if you haven't seen it. But this might be an opportunity to come to the Capitol and with us and kind of talk about those things.
And thanks for saying that, Kelly. We know you were working on this, and we don't have any doubts that that your associations were trying to get this wrong righted. So thank you for that. And yes, if y'all can go to the Capitol and advocate for the Medicaid Oversight Committee to fix this, that would be, and they would do it. That would be wonderful. So yes, I would like to see the agenda though. Kelly, can you send it?
Sure. Yep. I can send it to the group.
All right. Thank you.
I would also recommend that with this discussion that perhaps GACDA would write a formal letter in our position on this if we wanted to take a position. I don't know, I'm not, it's not my vote, but I think that would be an appropriate thing for GACDA to do.
In opposition or in support of?
What did I say? Did I say opposition? Don't
Yeah,
listen
I
to
was like,
words that
you
come
really
out of my
scared me
mouth.
for a minute. You really scared me for a second. I was like, wait, what?
Don't listen to the words, just know my heart. I meant to support the equity, to get this equitable between all these systems we just discussed.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I guess we just need a motion from this committee if somebody wanted to do that.
This is Karen. I'll motion that, I don't know, does it have to be a recommendation to the full body from
Yes,
this?
ma'am.
Okay, so I motion that the committee make a recommendation to support equitable funding for direct support workers throughout the entire Medicaid program. I guess, will that work? Is that the right language?
I'm thinking it probably should be like just the increase to the services, to the rate, so that they can make the, so that they can increase the rates. I mean, we don't want to tie everything like that.
Okay, that sounds good. That's
so
my
a lot
motion.
of people already gave raises. Like I know a lot of the ARCs already did, and we in trouble because we gave the raises knowing that this was coming, and now it's not coming. So I don't want to tie it to the money. If we could just say, you know, like recommend the reimbursement rate to increase, that would be great.
Yeah, okay, I'll make it a motion that way. Recommend that the reimbursement rate increase for direct support workers.
Elaine Harmon seconded.
Hey, this is Jamar Ragoda. Just to make sure that the motion is concise, lucid, I'm going to ask the originator to repeat it.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that, Jamar.
I think what he was saying.
Ask the originator of the motion to repeat it. So he could get it down.
I'll make a motion that, okay, now I forgot it.
The increase.
I'm sorry, folks. It's been a crazy week already. That the increase, I'm sorry.
Can I make a suggestion? Why don't we ask for parity?
Yeah.
That works. Okay, so I motion for parity and pay for, to make sure that the increase goes to the elderly waivers as well.
So would it be clear? I mean, this is all home and community-based services, right? Across our systems. So parity of rates for our home and community-based services across.
Can we say disability service system so that it also includes ICFs?
All right, so motion to ensure parity for home and community-based services across service systems for, all right, I'm gonna stop because I'm messing this up.
And populations. Service populations.
I think instead of the words home and community-based services, can we add, like, take that word out and put disability service system as a whole? Like everybody needs to be funded appropriately.
Kelly, I'm gonna defer and let you make the motion then because I am messing it up bad.
Isn't the issue that we want elderly and disability to have parity?
Yes.
We do, but if we say home and community-based, ICFs are not really technically considered home and community-based, and so it leaves that population out.
You might want to list the names of the programs just to make sure it's all included.
So does anyone know how to word it?
Kathy Dwyer had a good suggestion in chat. Parity and service rate across disability and elderly service systems.
Yeah, that's what Lynette was writing, across the spectrum.
Does that sound good for everyone? I guess
Thanks.
Karen,
I
do
think
you
that will
want to?
work.
Karen, do you want to make that motion based on Kathy's language?
I will let Kathy do it because I'm just not confident in myself being able to articulate this. I'm sorry. It must be too early in the morning and too early in the week for me.
Well, Kathy's not a committee member.
Oh,
so
okay.
Make
So,
the motion, but somebody else can.
Kelly, do you want to, or do you want me to do it?
You can second it, you mean? Well, they don't think you need to say the wording.
Yeah, I'm not a committee member. I mean,
All right, say
if
it
you want me
again,
to say it
Kathy.
for
Say
you,
it.
I can. But it was just as I typed that there be a parity in, and I don't know if it should be service rates or reimbursement rates. So y'all can tell me which would be better. Parity in service or reimbursement rates across the disability and elderly service systems.
All right.
That sounds great.
I'll make a motion that there be parity in service rate across disability and elderly service system. And I'm sorry, my camera's off. I apologize.
Okay, are y'all including the nursing home?
No, ma'am.
Well, you may want to make sure the wording
So maybe,
does not
it should be
include-
maybe it should be all home and community-based services, including ICFs. Maybe it should say that then.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. I motion that we that the full body send a letter for parity in service rate systems across disability and elderly service systems, including home and community-based services and ICFDDs. Is that correct? Bambi, you shaking your head?
No,
Sounds
because
good.
you still said elderly service systems, which would include nursing homes. So it's be
Okay.
parity
So
and
take out elderly service systems.
parity
and
in
we're
home
saying-
and community-based services.
Yeah.
Or-
So, all right, here we go. Kathy, thank you very much. Parity and I make a motion that we send a letter for parity in service rate across DDHCBS or home and community based and ICFDD service systems and elderly home and community based systems. Is that right? Is that what we're saying?
Umbrella.
Say that again, Miss Elaine. I couldn't hear you.
I say, did that get everything under the umbrella? Have you kind of that wording? Did it get everything under it?
I mean, that's DD,
Yeah.
home and community based in the ICFs, but not nursing homes. Yeah, that sounds like it makes it. Is that what everybody's thinking?
Hey,
I
this is
think it makes it.
Could you say it again, just so we can get it, the minutes?
Just for
Like,
fun, Jamar, so I can mess it up. No, I'm just
Jamar,
kidding.
it's in
You're doing
the
good,
chat.
Karen. You're doing good. You're doing
It's in
good.
the
Just
chat.
take your time.
It's in the chat, Jamar. Did you hear me? From Kathy Dwyer, the last chat.
Yes, I could hear you, but I only have one screen up, so it's very difficult for me to gain access to it.
I'll do it again. I
No,
think
no,
I can do it
I
with
could get
Kathy's
it.
help.
I'm cutting copying it now from the chat. I see.
Okay.
Thank you.
So there was a motion from Karen. Was there a second, Caroline, for that?
I seconded it.
Elaine seconded.
Yes, I did. I think that's a wonderful thing.
And so we just need a, any objection? No objection. Okay. Is there any abstentions? No abstentions? Okay, so this is just a recommendation to the full GACDA. Boy, that took a lot of work. That was our morning workout.
I am so sorry.
It was not your fault. No, we had to work through it.
That's what happens when your son doesn't go to sleep until 1 o'clock in the morning.
Oh,
Yes, indeed.
Caroline, there was a couple of other bills I wanted to highlight if no one else had any other bills, just wanted to talk about. Representative DePlessis had a couple of bills in regards to mental health. And they had to do with basically judicial commitment. Of involuntary outpatient treatment. So it was HB 589. And basically he worked with a judge in New Orleans where, you know, there are people who need some outpatient treatment that get involved with the court system. And this was a way to be able to help people to continue that with their outpatient treatment. And so that I thought that was a really a good bill. And he had another one in regards to mental health issues as well. So I thought those were both really good. I can't find that bill number, but there was also another bill in regards to that Representative Dustin Miller had in regards to ventilation treatment. And that was important because we had some issues during COVID, especially at the beginning, of people who use vents to survive. And they had issues of getting those vents and getting them worked on. There was some issues with how the rates were done between the insurance and those providers of those systems. And so he passed some legislation, which was HB 594. And that was sent to the governor. So that was important for that population. And I think those are the only two that weren't discussed that I had on my list. Oh, no, there was one more. I knew there was one more. There's one by Representative James, HB 285, which provides relative to the amount of time a person may remain in a voting machine. And so that gives an extension of 3 minutes, I believe, which if you're a person with a disability, you should already get that as an accommodation. But the fact that it's already built in for everybody just will make it easier to ensure that our people with disabilities, you know, automatically have that extended time they may need whenever, you know, they're voting. And that's it.
Cool.
And Kathy Dwyer has her hand raised.
Thank you, Bambi. I wanted to just make a note about the camera bill again. I had been messaging Kathleen Canino. She was unable to be on this committee because she was on Bessie at the time. But I had mentioned to her how there was a suggestion by you, Bambi, to make sure the sped ed committees get involved at the local levels. She said that all the sped advisory committee boards, to her knowledge, are just school administration. And when I questioned, you know, shouldn't their parents be on there? Because I'll tell you, I'm not real familiar with it since my daughter graduated over 20 years ago. But she said there's a loophole that they're using, that they have teachers who are also parents of children with disabilities serving in the parent role. To me, that seems like that could be a conflict, because if they're having teachers as a parent role, I'm not so sure they're going to be comfortable to truly advise on something that may be in conflict with what the school admin might do. So I don't know if we need to look at that law again and revise it, or what, to make sure it's parents and that there's no conflict with teachers serving as parents as well, that may, you know, wear two hats, but I would think that might be a conflict.
Yeah, that's a good point that she's making. because it requires to be at least, it has to be 50% parents. And so they're doing that. Yeah, I mean, so I think that kind of goes on to the next, Caroline, to the next agenda item is basically goals, future goals. So, good segue, Kathy.
You're welcome.
Unless, Caroline, I don't know if you want to see if there's anybody else who has any other things with the previous agenda item.
Yeah, any final thoughts on just the wrap up from the session or bills? Okay. Okay, Bambi, do you want me to talk about goals or are you handling that?
I can handle that. If you're looking at the agenda, the link on the agenda goes back to our platforms, policy platforms that we adopted in December. And so that's kind of what we try to stay. I mean, it's very broad. I think most anything we discuss is going to fall underneath that. But really this agenda item was to talk about what our next steps are in regards to, add my spotlight, in regards to what we want to do, what do we need to work on. And so I think that what Kathy just brought up is that's legislation that we have passed, and now we see that it's not working the way it was intended. And so just have discussions about those issues of things that we need to, next steps that we need to take, or if there might be something new we need to bring up. But just want to open the floor for any ideas you have, because we need to start working on it now for next session.
Bambi, this is Anne. I know at some point during session you were working on trying to get a sponsor for a bill to extend the COVID exemptions for open meeting laws to allow continued virtual participation. What's going on with that?
With the limited bills, by the time we were talked to anyone, everybody had their 5 bills committed. I've talked to some legislators every legislator I talked to was supportive of the idea. So I feel like we could move forward with that next year, and they have unlimited bills. So I definitely want to see that on our agenda. I think that's important to the disability community. And Kelly has her hand raised also.
Yeah, we talked to a couple of legislators and they were all interested too. Representative Davis was like really excited about it. So I don't know if we want to either way. But yeah, everybody was like very supportive of it. They all thought it was very positive.
It's really disappointing that we couldn't get it this year, because I feel like it would have been one of those unanimous type bills that we could have got it in the posture it needed to be. So that was disappointing.
If we would have thought about it just 1 week earlier, I think we would have been able to make it, but whatever.
Yeah. But just a reminder, if you're a person with a disability and you need an accommodation, a request to be able to attend virtually, or you're a caretaker of someone with a disability, that would likely be an appropriate ADA accommodation. So even in the meantime, just want to make sure that we get that message out to people. Steve Kaufman has his hand raised.
One thing I think that we also need to include with that is there be some sort of standard way that the virtual meetings are conducted. I've lost track of the number of virtual meetings I've attended, and it seems like almost each and every one is done differently in terms of rules.
Yeah, I mean, I think, just my opinion, that like having, the camera on to be able to show that it's you in the meeting is important. And I know sometimes I do not want to turn on my camera, but if we have to go in person, we have to have ourselves prepared to be in person. So I think that, having our cameras on is a good requirement. And I get that sometimes people have technical issues, but I don't see that as any different than somebody having transportation issues to get to an in-person meeting. Like you have to work through some things. That's just my thoughts on it. Do we have any other suggestions for next steps for legislation?
Would it be appropriate to ask for a study resolution on this issue of the committees and their makeup?
Of what committees?
The school district stuff we were
Ah.
just talking about.
Yeah, I'm wondering though, I think that's the point of that would be to get the information about the special ed advisory councils. The only issue I'd have with that would put us doing a study resolution next year and not getting information until later. I'm wondering if there's something we could do now to get that, make a public records request of school districts and ask that they, who are the members of this committee. That might be something we could do now to where then the next year in 2021 and 2022, we can have legislation. I don't know, what are you guys' thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, you could send a letter to every school district requesting that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That could be a start. And then if we don't get a good answer by, they got all year, right? But you don't get an answer by the next session, then we can ask for something. And the next question is, if we discover that, the intent of the law is being distorted, then how do we fix that?
Yeah, I think that's a good start, trying to get the information, and then in upcoming meetings, we can work on, our education committee.
Now, this is something that should be on their website. This is public information that people should be able to find out. So it should be easy for them to produce it. I mean, if you wrote them today, they should have that information for you within a month. Give them a couple of months.
Right. Okay. Steve has his hand up.
I'm just, maybe they've changed and they're much more cooperative nowadays, but way back when, it was very difficult to get every single school district to comply with the request. And then comes the issue of what do you do about the ones that aren't compliant in terms of supplying that. The other concern that I would have is that unless you know that that particular person who is listed as a parent is also employed in one form or fashion by the school system, it's going to be difficult to do kind of a background check to make sure that the people listed as parents aren't also school district employees.
That could be included in the questionnaire, though. Just ask how many of the people that are on this list and which people on this list are employed by the school district.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like who are the people, what are their roles, and is the person employed or not with the school district? And so everybody has to be a yes or no. They might be a parent, but they could be a yes, so that would. Okay, do we have anything else that people want to bring up? I know there's so much, we could talk all day about this stuff. Kathy Dwyer?
Thank you, Bambi. In addition to what y'all were just discussing about who are employees that are on there representing parent role, I'm wondering if we want to ask about relatives, particularly if they're a relative of an administrator, if we want to go that far or not.
I'll back up what Kathy said, because I'll be honest with you, I come from a parish that it's the largest employer in the parish, the school system is. You're going to run into that a lot, especially in the rural parishes. And whereas maybe the parent on the committee isn't necessarily employed by the school district, the husband is, the father is, the mother is, the child's aunts and uncles are, and I've seen that become a real problem. So I don't know that there's any answer or solution to that, but I mean, it is a point.
Karonda Corley has her hand raised.
Great morning, and thank you so much, Ms. Bambi, for allowing me this the opportunity to speak. I'm gonna piggyback off of what Kathy and Karen both stated. I come from a parish where even when it comes to our special education advisory council, a lot of the parents that are put on that council are employees of the school system, so they're not going to speak. They're not going to speak openly or speak up for our children with disabilities in our school system. And like Karen stated, our school system is one of the largest employers for our area. So it's an intimidation factor to actually keep us in the status quo, to not be serviced, to continue to be underserved and unserved. But also to mute our voices and keep us stagnant. And one of the questions I really would like to know is, have we considered making the school systems having Bessie to actually put a policy together in regards to the cameras being in the school system, so we can have one uniform policy instead of every school system having their own policy? Because if every school system is allowed to develop their own policy, then we're going to be dealing with the same issue we're dealing with as it relates to ABA, being able to be in the school system to provide service to our children. And so in an effort to prevent that from happening, I think it would be great, since Bessie is also looking at the accountability task force, that we actually have the accountability task force address that as well, or have Bessie create something in addition to seat that will actually make sure that they can put in place policies, realistic policies, that is extremely inclusive of our children with disabilities. Because everything that's being put together right now by Bessie is not including our children with disabilities. And as we know, Bessie is meeting today, they met yesterday. Nothing about children with disabilities is actually being taken into consideration, because SEAT was supposed to meet yesterday and could not meet due to Bessie actually meeting.
Thanks, Karonda. I mean, I think I know the law requires that the school district has to come up with the policy. So, but we definitely could request Bessie to have a template. We can make any request we want, really, to Bessie. Any other recommendations for legislation or future legislation or goals for this committee or for GACDA?
Hey, Bambi, it's Kelly. I would hope that maybe the committee would also want to continue. I know there's a couple of the bills that need some work on, even though they got passed, but that we would support. So like and I don't have them all in front of me because I'm driving right now, I'm sorry. But I know like the dental bill, maybe that we, the group could help with that as well. But, and I think I made a note on some of those other ones that I sent you, the update. But if we could kind of just like keep informed about those, like even 204, maybe have LDH come and kind of talk about how, we're making some of those permanent, those kind of things. That would be nice if we could get like updates on those bills that passed session, or even if did not pass session, but there were next steps planned for them, if we could follow up with those next steps. But that's totally just a suggestion.
Yeah, and I know, Kelly, one of the ones you had mentioned the group working on was with House Bill 446, which Bambi mentioned. The accessibility group had talked about developing the I don't know if it's the job description or the responsibilities of the ADA coordinator. Yeah, so I know that was an identified next step for that one at least.
Yeah, because it really, it doesn't end with session, like that's just the beginning. And not until everything is really fully developed, in my opinion, is it really like done. And so just a suggestion, I don't know how the group feels about it, but I love to see things through. I got to get the gratification at the end. So up to you guys.
And in regards to 446, one of the next steps in regards to the governor's office plan with the state ADA coordinator office was also to put in statute the state as a model employer task force, which now is operating underneath an executive order of the governor, but we want to put that in statute so that work continues. And the idea was to put that task force within the ADA coordinator office, and hopefully have funding for a person to staff it, because I am certainly inadequate in what I try to do with the task force. So I think that's probably a next step for next year as well, creating the same task force in statute and establishing it within that office so we have continuity. And we had Kathy Dwyer has her hand raised, and then Steve Kaufman had his hand raised.
Thank you, Bambi. One thing we as the dental task force could use your help with is we're going to need to identify funding for the comprehensive dental services for adults with IDD come the next year. It's going to be around $5 million. While I said, it passed through all committees and so forth, the last committee was the Senate Finance Committee, and the chair did mention to Rep. Butler that they're funding it this year, but we're going to need, $5 million state general funds for the next year. So we just need to make sure we can identify that funding, be it through the new sports betting bill or some other source to help fund it, so that, we can get the program implemented.
And Steve Kaufman, and then Kathleen Canino.
One thing is to make sure that any concurrent resolutions are actually met and discussed. There's always the comment that, well, they don't have the force of statute or law. That is true. It's very difficult sometimes to get them to whoever is on the study group or whatever to actually meet. So it's imperative that people follow up and make sure that those groups are meeting. And if there's deadlines to produce a report, that they do that by the deadline so that it can be considered in the next session.
Very good point, Steve. We need to go back and look at all of those I mean, one of the issues, another issue this brings to mind is, and it's something that was brought up in the accessibility committee, and I think it'll be brought up in the full GACDA meeting, is in regards to a bill that Representative Pat Smith authored in 2017 in regards to accessibility for people who are deaf at the state capitol. We're 4 years later and that bill has not been implemented. It is not just a resolution, it is a law, and it still has not been implemented. And so the Commission for the Deaf has kind of taken the lead to help with that. But I mean, that's just the point of what you're saying. I've seen many of those resolutions not move forward because there's nobody behind pushing it. And the same thing can happen with the law if we don't make sure that it's, you know.
Right.
Solid.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier when I was saying that you can't like just end it, but with, oh, it passed, because sometimes nobody really knows what to do with the next steps. And sometimes, to be honest, they're forgotten. So, yeah.
Don't depend on anyone else to get it done. And Kathleen, and then I see Karonda has her hand raised. And if you can turn on your camera, I don't know if you can, it helps the interpreter. If not, it's okay.
Okay. So, well, the kids are running around and
that's okay, then don't worry about it. That's okay. Plus you're a superstar, Kathleen, so we just want to
so I was gonna just it might have already been said because I missed some of it. Noah was barking orders at me, but anyway, for the cameras in the classrooms, maybe financed, because it's upon that it doesn't go into effect unless there's funding. And then just to add on to the special education councils at the school, I know when I attended, they were not allowing, like they had it at 2:30 in the afternoon, and they didn't allow parental, like people to speak that came. They weren't aware that the open meeting law applied. And I know that Jefferson Parish had that issue too. So I don't know if there's anything that can be done, or a letter sent maybe just to let them know that, or if something can be changed to say that, you know, if parents come, if they don't get on the council, at least they could come and have a voice still, because they told me I wasn't allowed to speak at ours. And then I didn't know if there was anything that we could do to, that once if a parent does request a camera at a school, maybe it's tracked to see, you know, how many cameras are being requested and if they're being requested. And that was it.
Those are good points. Thank you, Kathleen.
I do think that's a good point. I like that, Kathleen, and some sort of, you know, quarterly, annual, whatever it may be, reporting that has to come out of that special ed advisory group from each parish. That would be real helpful to understand kind of what exactly is going on in that group.
Thanks, Karen. And the meeting we're actually at our end time, but we want to give Ms. Karonda Corley a chance to make her comment.
Thank you, Bambi. I think a really good a really good law that we should look at is they have, and this has been passing in other states. They're changing the burden of proof for parents that pursue litigation against school systems, and making the school system actually have to provide the burden of proof, saying that they're actually providing the services or the instructional minutes as they're stating in the IEPs to the children, instead of making the parents have to fight too hard, because that's not how the due process hearing process was actually designed. And I think that it would be great if we do something along the lines, and I can actually provide the information of all the different states that have been providing, that has actually been putting this law into place. Because right now we have so many parents that cannot afford to fight a school system which is why we have the cameras bill, which was so important, because which leads to another bill that we should look at, which is including a real true reporting process on staff members that abuse children in the school system, but also create a real database so that those individuals cannot be hired in another school system in our state, and allow that information to follow them, because we have certain laws in place that are not being followed, such as the Teacher Bill of Rights, which states that that's supposed to go in their file and they're supposed to have a hearing, but none of this is actually taking place because the mandated reporting law is not actually really being followed by the school systems. And it creates a real true problem for parents whose children are being abused at the hands of individuals that work in the school system. So I think if we look at creating a real database along with a real true mandating reporting bill, or something that that include like them, change the wording of them as being caregivers, because I know they have somewhere in one of the laws where they're considered like the parents for the 8 hours of the day that they have our children, but it's falling by the wayside to the extreme. And so I was just thinking that maybe we can look at that for next year.
Bambi, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I said, thank you, Karonda. Lynette had her hand raised, and then I see Brenda and Elaine, and we are 3 minutes over. So like, if you can make your comments brief, we'd appreciate it.
To piggyback off of what Karonda was saying, this is Elaine Harmon. When a teacher is removed from a school because of their behavior to a child, and they go and get employment elsewhere, can we also put a stipulation that a time frame that they have to go through some type of process and get reevaluated to see that they are competent and capable enough to handle their job like they're supposed to, instead of abusing these kids, jumping from state to state to go and get employment elsewhere, because they are looking to provide for their families as well. But we need to try to have something in line to whereas they can be held accountable.
Thank you, Elaine. And then we have Lynette and then Brenda.
We could meet to discuss progress and see what needs to be done.
You said at the legislative meetings, right? And or a full committee, no, legislative meetings, y'all can meet to discuss the legislation that has been passed and see what the progress is on that particular thing.
Yeah.
And see what needs to be done.
Yeah, that's a good point, Lynette. And then last person would be Brenda.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yes, in regards to the special education advisory councils, parent engagement, not just involvement, is essential. And when selecting parent participation, diversity should be considered. Diversity in the perspective of, we have parents who have background or are involved in the military, English language learners, low incidence that they will be representing. And basically they could think about the ESSA subgroups or cohorts. Every student succeeds at subgroups and cohorts when selecting parents. Thank you.
Thanks, Brenda. Those are all good points. And Jamar, I know he's taking good notes for our minutes for all these good ideas. And Caroline, I'll let you go ahead and wrap it up.
Okay. So So do we need a public comment, or was that public comment, Bambi?
I think that's public comment. No one else has their hand
Okay.
raised. So
Okay.
need to adjourn. You can have unanimous adjournment if there's no opposition. Doesn't seem to be
Okay.
any. Okay, guys, we have
Great.
our full council meeting on this link at 12 o'clock. So get some lunch and your energy, and we'll see you all at noon for that meeting. Thank you, guys. And thank you, Caroline.
Thanks, y'all. Thank y'all. See you soon.
You're gonna leave the meeting? or what?
Thank you so much, Caroline. I appreciate it.
Leave it up. They're gonna just go out.